Turn on your inner light show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is David Walsh, Ph.D., founder of Mind Positive Parenting, an award-winning psychologist, the subject of a nationally televised PBS special, Raising Mediawise Kids, and author of Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids. Parents need to learn new skills in our digital time period and also keep some of our old skills. Let's not throw everything out. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much for having me, Debbie.
Now, the topic on my mind is ADHD children, and I have a double-pronged question. Number one, is there really an increase? I know we are good diagnosticians at this point, or is it the medicalization of America? And the second part, is technology responsible if there is an increase in ADHD?
Well, I think, Debbie, both of your questions are very important questions. The debate has been raging on for quite a while, as you probably know, about whether there really is more ADHD or whether we're just better at identifying it. And clearly some of the increase is the result of that. When I think of my childhood, I can remember kids in my class back in the 1950s that were probably ADHD. But we didn't call them ADHD back in the 1950s. What we called them is bad kids. And the intervention was not medication. The intervention was punishment. And if that didn't work, then we doubled the dosage. And now as we understand more about development, as we understand more about the brain, we are realizing that many of those kids that we used to identify as behavior problems really are wired with a different brain, what I call the ADHD brain. Now, that is part of the answer. I think your second question, leads to another part of the question. The attention spans of all of our kids, there's no doubt those attention spans have shrunken. One of the things that I write about in Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids is about the different attention systems we have in our brain. We have a kind of a language deficit in English because we only have one word called attention. And that leads a lot of parents and teachers to think, well, attention is one thing in terms of the brain. And that's not true. There are different attention systems. And one is located deep within the brain. I call it the reactive attention system. It's hardwired. That means we don't have to learn it. It's involuntary. And it's wired to pay attention to things that move and things that are emotionally stimulating. That's the one that's at work when I'm at home reading a great mystery, and at the very corner of my eye, I see a little mouse run along the floorboard. There's no doubt where my attention would be focused. It would be on that moving mouse. We have another attention system, Debbie, that's not located deep within the brain. It's located in the cortex, the prefrontal cortex, the executive center of the brain. I call it, in Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids, focused attention. That's not hardwired. That has to be developed. That has to be practiced.
It also has to mature.
Exactly.
That's the last thing to mature.
The last part of the brain to mature, you're absolutely right, is the prefrontal cortex. But it has to be developed. We don't just wait for time to pass. We have to develop that. I think the technology that is so much a part of kids' lives today, kind of bombarding them with messages left and right, text messages, video games, etc. What we have is an increasing number of kids with an overdeveloped reactive attention system and an underdeveloped focused attention system. And all you have to do is talk to any classroom teacher in the country to get confirmation of that.
Well, I could kind of see that, David, with Sesame Street. And I'm going to get called on the carpet about it, but it wasn't like Captain Kangaroo or Mr. Green
Right.
Jeans or Mr. Rogers later on. But what happened was like cut and paste, juxtapose this, a minute of this, a minute of that, flashing on the screen. It's got to alter toddlers' brains.
Well, there's no question Sesame Street was an incredibly popular program, so many children saw it. But it was also part of the evolution in television, where there were much more quick edits, or it's much more that cutting and pasting. Now, to Sesame Street's credit, and I should disclose, Debbie, that I'm on the advisory board for PBS Kids, and so I have a little bit of an inside information about that, and also, of course, a great value of that program. PBS Kids, and Sesame Street, of course, is one of their flagship programs. They are well aware of their responsibility with kids, and based on research, they keep altering their program based on what we learn more and more about the brain. And so you'll notice that today's Sesame Street is a little bit slower paced than it was 25 years ago.
Glad to hear that. I don't watch it anymore. I was, a prisoner, and I had to watch it. But I will say that pediatricians don't recommend toddlers or preschoolers really watching TV.
That's correct. Absolutely correct. And if you read the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations on media and children, and you're absolutely right, they recommend no media for children 2 and under, and very limited for children 2 to 5. It's all based on the brain research. One of the basic principles, Debbie, of brain functioning is that whatever the brain does a lot of is what the brain gets good at. Our brains are remarkably adaptable to the world in which we find ourselves. And so whatever the brain does a lot of is what the brain gets good at, whether that's tennis, whether that's math, whether that's video games, whether that's texting. The English word practice is kind of our translation of that very, very important neuroscientific principle.
That's our circuitry, and we can change habits. Children, of course, easier than adults by rewiring the brain with habituation and getting into the flow. I guess that's what you're getting at. We get into a flow based on the circuits. But let me ask you this, and I really enjoyed this term you came up with, tongue-in-cheek. Could you talk about discipline deficit disorder? I mean, I said you're right on the mark, David.
I think one of the challenges of 21st century parents, Debbie, is that...
Oh, I'm getting the signal for commercial break.
Okay.
Hold that thought. We're coming back to discipline parents, and we will return with Dr. David Walsh, author of Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Light, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving, and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with Dr. David Walsh, author of Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids. All right, what's the deal on the discipline?
Well, let's start by talking, Debbie, about what we know from research is a critical success factor for children, and that is self-discipline. That's been established over so many studies, over so many years. The ability for kids to say no to themselves, to manage their own behavior. And I think we clearly know that that's an absolutely essential ingredient for their success, for their happiness. But it's a challenge in the 21st century because parents in previous generations had a culture that reinforced the message of no. Well, today we live in a culture that reinforces the message of more, fast, easy, and fun. And so we are constantly told that whatever we have, we need more of it. Whatever model we have, there's a better one coming out next month. We're constantly told that everything should be easy and fast, and children from a very young age are told that everything should be fun. And so, babies who are raised with Baby Einstein DVDs from the age of 5 or 6 months, their little brains are being wired to expect nonstop entertainment. And then when they get to school, what do they run into but a teacher? And for many kids, what a bummer that is. Not everything has a jingle, not everything dances on the smartboard, and so for some kids, even as young as kindergarten or first grade, they're already coming home complaining of boredom.
Yes,
well, that's
the dreaded word, by the way. I'm bored.
Yes.
I totally see that in terms of this generation of young adults and those that are following. What's very important here, I think, is what I want to explore with you is that on the one hand, we have this pumped up self-esteem. On the other hand, we have low self-esteem. In the middle, we have fragile self-esteem. And with the discipline equation, we have Tiger Mom.
Yes. Yeah.
And Tiger Mom's very successful. I can tell you there are a lot of people who are adults and are meteoric in their careers based on having a Tiger Mom. It does work, but they seem to have difficulty socially.
Yeah. Well, the one of the places where I disagree with the author of the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother is the emphasis on being number one, emphasis on being the best. What we know about self-esteem is that self-esteem is based on competence and achievement. That doesn't necessarily mean being number one, being the best. Debbie, it's all about balance. And we do want our kids to have all of those inner resiliency muscles so they can persevere in the face of challenge, so they can delay gratification. And by the way, the inability to delay gratification and the giving up attitude are part of what I mean, the symptoms of what you referred to a couple of minutes ago, discipline deficit disorder, or as I refer to it, DDD. It's things like distraction, the inability to delay gratification, impatience, a sense of entitlement. And that's because the culture reinforces those things. And so one of the real challenges for the 21st century parent is to make sure that our kids come equipped with the inner resources to be able to manage their own behavior. My child can be the smartest whippersnapper on the block, but if he or she can't manage his or her own impulses, that's going to have a big impact on their success and their happiness.
But what do you do with parents who are messed up already? I mean, you're preaching to the choir, and I grew up in the 50s as well, but we have parents who cannot control their impulses and would not pass the marshmallow test if I said, if you could wait 15 more minutes, you'll get your second marshmallow.
Yep. The classic marshmallow test. That's right. And I think here's my experience, Debbie, is that a lot of parents, they start to, because they do have a sense of entitlement themselves and because they are impatient and have trouble delaying gratification, what they start to do is they start to run into trouble with their own kids because they start to be very frustrated by the misbehavior or their inability. And then, I do parent seminars all the time. I just did one last night for 200 parents. And when they start to see that they are contributing to what's happening with their kids, then they start to take a look at themselves. And I always tell parents, the first place we have to take a look is in the mirror. What behavior are we modeling? If we, for example, tell our kids, that we need to pay attention and we need to be focused, and then we can't stay away from our BlackBerry or our iPhone, and we're constantly checking it. I was at a playground yesterday. I took my grandson yesterday to a playground. We're enjoying an early spring here in Minnesota, and it was our first trip to the playground for the year. And as I watched many of the other young parents there, I think I was the only grandparent at the playground, as I watched the other 8 or 9 parents there with their kids, more than half of them spent their time sitting on benches checking their text messages or checking their email as their kids were playing. And, and so it's a good example of how we have to start to model and be able to kind of be examples for the kind of behavior that we want to see in our children.
See, the problem is, and I'm going to tell you frankly, I loved your book, and that's not the problem. And I wish I could have read it while I was raising my children. Nobody gave me a license to be a parent. I had to learn how to drive, pass an exam.
Yep. You're absolutely right. In a way, in previous generations, a lot of young parents, because, they tended to live near their extended families, a lot of them got their parenting training from the generation ahead of them. Well, that's not true. That's not nearly as true as it used to be. And so a lot of parents do kind of fly by the seat of their pants. Now, one of the points that I make in Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids is that parenting is an art. Always has been, always will be. But science can inform the art. And as we learn more about children's brains, how they work, how they develop, that can really help us practice our art a lot more effectively.
Well, we can become a little more competent, but it's hard to control our impulses when it comes to technology. But we're going to go to commercial break, some technology, and return with Dr. David Walsh, author of Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids. Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is the message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers. We're back with Dr. David Walsh, author of Smart Parenting, Smarter Kids. Now, based on what you wrote in the book and my own research, should we be speaking bilingually to children from birth? And
to the extent that we can, the answer is yes. And this is quite a reversal, Debbie, from advice that parents would get 25 years ago. The thinking 25 years ago was that if children hear 2 languages all the time, they get very confused. And part of that fear was driven by bilingual children typically start to talk a little bit later than single language children. And so there was a real fear about that. Well, now the research has gotten a lot better. And now we understand that bilingual children don't just have the advantage of being able to converse in 2 different languages, but it has very, very distinct brain advantages. Children who are raised bilingually, for example, tend to be much better, tend to be able to pay attention better. And part of that is probably because their brains have literally been wired to pay attention to what language I need to respond in. They're also better at executive functioning, managing impulses. So there are definite advantages to children who are raised bilingually. So if children are in an environment where that's possible, parents should not hesitate at all to do everything they can to raise their children bilingually.
how about being trilingual?
Even more of the same. A lot of times we Americans are kind of amazed by, for example, people from Europe who might be fluent in 4 or 5 different languages, and we say, my gosh, how do they do that? Well, the way that they do that is that they probably grew up in an area because various languages are very close geographically. If they're born in certain parts of Europe, they would hear, as they were growing up, they would hear 4 or 5 languages on a regular basis. And our brain is remarkably adaptable, particularly early on in language acquisition. And the window of opportunity, as I call it, for language acquisition is open the widest in the early years of life. The earlier, the better.
Now, I'm going to ask you a challenging question. Is distraction always bad for children? Or are there situations where it's a good thing?
No, it's not always bad. And I think part of what we need to help our children do is to develop the ability to focus attention even when there are distractions. And so we don't want them to live in a kind of an isolated world, and helping them build the attention muscle, as we might consider it, is something, that we can do when we're dealing with distractions. Now, we also need to help our children understand, and because a lot of kids don't believe this, particularly teenagers, that even though they think that they can multitask, the research is very, very clear that we can't. We can't do it effectively. We can multitask, but when we do, we lose accuracy, we lose efficiency, and we lose speed. And so these are, you're hitting so many interesting topics.
On the road.
Exactly.
I think as adults we have learned that you need to single task. But what I find interesting is, have you ever noticed that kids and teens doodle while they listen to a teacher? And sometimes teachers get very upset about it, but I think kids are absorbing while doodling. So I don't consider that multitasking, but maybe relaxing the mind so you can absorb information. Do you agree with that?
I agree with you, Debbie, on that. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Because teachers sometimes really don't, we send our kids to school and we hope that the teachers are up on the latest methodologies, but essentially, which takes us back to the beginning of this interview, there's a lot of conformity in school. And sometimes we label a child a behavioral problem is because that child is really not being challenged or is not a conformist. Sometimes we suffocate the creativity out of our children for the sake of the test.
No, I think that that's definitely true, and I think it is even, you mentioned the testing phenomenon, which has...
But our time together, I'm sorry, has just flown, and you have given us so much usable information.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for having me.
And do you have a website where we can learn more about you?
I do. If people want more information or to ask a question, DrDaveWalsh.com, DrDaveWalsh.com.
Thank you so much, because you were so forthcoming and giving, and I threw some tough questions at you. You're all right, Dave.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Affirmation of the week. If you are getting mixed signals, don't move until the message gets clearer. And now for the latest medical trends. Low-carb, high-fat diets led to more damaging, more deadly heart attacks and impaired recovery of heart functions in new studies. On any given day, I found this very cute, 90% of us eat snacks. That means we're eating in between meals. And on average, here's the cute part, we eat twice the number of daily snacks that Americans ate 30 years ago, according to a report by the USDA. We have become a nation of grazers. I think if we watch our calories, that's okay. So keep an eye on it. And here's something that made me happier than happy. Regular chocolate eaters are thinner. Yay! I'm going to hold on to that little research before they change their minds. From the Harvard Heart Letter, people who are depressed are more likely to develop heart disease than those who aren't, and are at greater risk of stroke. So let's not depress people further by telling them this, but you should know, because knowledge is power. And also from the Harvard Heart Letter, a recent study showed that eating lean beef, along with vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, can actually reduce cholesterol. I'm a carnivore, so I was very happy to hear that. But they do caution, stay away from processed meats, cold cuts, and hot dogs. Nearly 26 million Americans have diabetes, and excess body fat is the number one risk factor. The good news is that losing as little as 10% of your body weight can reduce your risk and even reverse the disease in some people. So, along with exercise, cutting calories is still the most effective and safest way to drop all these excess pounds. And I have to let you know that a lot of money is being spent on anesthesia during routine gastroenterology procedures that are unnecessary. Patients at low risk don't require anesthesia services during these procedures. Well, we come to the close of another show. I have an educational website on stress management totally free. TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. All the radio shows with the guest experts are archived for your listening pleasure. You just go to YouTube and turn on your inner light, Debbie Mandel, and you can hear the shows. Subscribe to my free newsletter at TurnOnYourInnerLight.com to have the latest radio programs emailed directly to you, a fresh new article on stress management, and the health tips fully delineated where you can read them and think about them and send them to your friends from TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. Have a wonderful week and see you on the radio.